Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lou Kerner, and welcome to Crypto Asia TV, episode number 2. We've got a great show for you today, featuring Wei Shi Khai of Longhash Ventures. Hey, Wei Shi, how you doing?
Hello, Shi Khai here.
And you're visiting us from Singapore, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Terrific. So we're going to start. You'll start the show with a presentation, giving us an overview of Longhash Ventures. We'll then have a fireside chat with the two of us talking about Longhash and other things going on in Asia crypto world. And then we'll finish it off from Q&A from the audience. So if you're in the audience, you have a question, put it into the chat. And if we pick your question, we'll bring you up and make you a panelist on the show. And so with that, I'm going to make you a host. And then you'll be able to grab the screen and go over the presentation. So you are now the host and can grab the screen.
Okay, thanks so much, Lou. Let me share the screen now. Here we go. Can you see it?
Yep, there you go.
All right, thanks again, Lou, for this opportunity to share with everyone here tuning in to Crypto Asia TV. So again, my name is Shi Khai, and I'm from Longhash Ventures, and we're a global blockchain accelerator and investor, although we're focused on Asia. Now, to just give a brief context about myself before we start, before joining Longhash, about the founding team here in Singapore about 2.5 years ago, I was actually with McKinsey doing a lot of management consulting, focusing on the digital transformation of banks, financial institutions in general. And I think naturally, when you think about like transforming financial institutions, we came across the idea of blockchain. And I really found that even in a top tier world-class consulting firm like McKinsey, there was a severe, I think, lack of understanding and knowledge of the technology and the community, which is like really innovating so quickly that it's so hard to keep up unless you're in the industry itself. So that's why I decided to leave the company and join Longhash along with my ex-colleague Emma, who also has a McKinsey background. Now,
how did you meet the Longhash team?
So I actually met Emma while we were working on a said banking project in Vietnam. So we were doing this strategy and like digital transformation kind of thing for one of those banks in Hanoi. And she was there for just, I think, a month or so. And then we worked together briefly. And then we had the opportunity to just talk about blockchain, crypto in general. And we found that we were both actually already super passionate, already investing in the crypto assets and some ICOs. So I think when she got invited to like start the team here, she immediately thought of me and invited me to join the founding team.
Perfect.
All right. So what is Longhash Ventures? Well, at the high level, what we want to do is to accelerate the development and adoption of blockchain technology. And how we do that is by working with people through the idea of an accelerator focused on building Web 3.0 native economy. So to do that, we have set up our network, especially in Asia. So our main base is in Singapore, and we also have some people in Shanghai and Hong Kong, and of course our network of investors, startups, partners all across Asia. I'm going to jump ahead from some of the thesis things right into our co-partners. We're very lucky to have started, not just by ourselves, but with the strong support of a couple of pillars who are very active investors in the blockchain space. I think the first two I would name would be Fenbushi Capital and Hashkey Capital. And I understand that Hashkey Capital was actually featured for the first Crypto Asia TV. So audience members, yeah, if you already know of them, then you understand the description. Otherwise, feel free to check out the first episode as well, pitching in the content. Sure. So these two are actually some of the most active and the most kind of like strategically placed blockchain investors in Asia itself. And as well as Enterprise Singapore, which is a government agency of the Singapore government under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, very fortunate to have their support to actually grow the innovation and startup landscape in Singapore. So with the help of our investors and of course our team, we have set up the program, which is Longhash Hatch, essentially a 12-week program to help startups. I think those of you who are familiar with the typical accelerator model, it's a short period of time where we work intensively with startups to help them in every way that they need. I think here we mentioned the core components, which are strategy, fundraising, go-to-market, the technology support, and of course, like any admin stuff like accounting, tax, legal, and so on. And all this is like
there obviously are lots of accelerators around the world. Were there any in particular that you drew inspiration from?
I think we were debating for a long time whether we wanted to go with more like a Y Combinator model, which is the gold standard, I think, for just like a general accelerator, supporting early stage startups and providing funding, and like getting a very strong network of founders and alumni to then help with that. So we definitely took a lot of inspiration from them, like our investment documents. I think pretty much everyone takes off from them. But we also took a lot of inspiration from Techstars, which is I would say the alternative model to Y Combinator, whereby they really focus on like partnering with corporates, people like Disney, Barclays, various banks and institutions, to then offer like kind of a corporate innovation service. So what we have landed on is actually somewhere in between, where like we do want to come out with some funding of our own, and we do want to build a strong alumni network and have a standalone brand of Longhash. At the same time, we recognize that our expertise is really on the business side and our network of bringing like investors and professionals. So on the technology side, we then partner with certain ecosystem partners to then deliver this program. So far, we've worked with first Polkadot, which we are also a private investor in, and then Zilliqa. And then now our upcoming batch is going to be with Algorand. And we also actually just secured our next partner for next year's batch as well, which will be announced in a couple of weeks' time. So welcome to follow us to follow that. So just to paint a bit of a picture of like the kind of network that we bring to the startups, we try to bring a good blend of like not just the crypto native guys, people who have like built stuff, like guys from Digix or from Gnosis, but also people who have like more academic backgrounds, like Professor Wan Zhiguo and other professors who have like expertise in, or Professor Pei, expertise in like cryptography, fintech, and also institutions like Temasek, which is Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, banks like Standard Chartered, professional organizations like McKinsey, EY, and INSEAD, and so on. Of course, I mean, the investor base is quite self-explanatory. So with the help of everyone, so far we have accelerated 25 companies, kept a very low acceptance rate, raised about 18 million of funds for all of our startups, and I'm very proud to share that everybody that has gone through our program received some sort of funding in either grants or VC funding, or some other third-party source of funding. And we're able to do this because we've been building this network for a significant period of time. So should I pause here? I can go into some like our portfolio, or we can, any particular areas I should elaborate on?
Sure. So I think it'd be great to go into your portfolio. Before you do that, though, in terms of the mentoring, is there a process? How are the matches made between the companies and the mentors? Sure.
So we think we've experimented quite a few models, same as like our technology partnership, and we found that mentorship is something that is quite organic. You can't really like force people to then like come together. Hey, you are now a mentor to this startup, and like you have to spend all this time and commit all this time, right? It has to be kind of like we create these opportunities, be it in like quarterly networking events during the program, outside of the program, for people to come together and just talk to each other, to understand each other, what they're building, what expertise are, and then so they can form some of these organic relationships. And online as well, anytime we have a new cohort starting, we would then like create these like descriptions, the one pages for all the programs, send it to all the mentors. And we make sure that the startups also know about our full mentor list who can help. And then they can say, hey, I'd like to meet with this startup, or I'd like to meet with this mentor. And then we can facilitate some of this matching. I think increasingly, we're also trying to structure some fixed events. Like for example, right before demo day, we're gonna have the pitch feedback session. We call it pitching madness, where you get like 10, 15 mentors all giving feedback in rapid fire succession for your pitches. So they're like these little touch points as well. And is there compensation for the mentors? What are they getting out of it? Yeah, I think most mentors are actually, well, I think in the startup space, there is actually a good culture of just kind of like giving back to the startups, especially if you are a founder yourself. And for kind of like enterprises, there's an idea of like, I just want to like get to know the cutting edge startups, right? So often many mentors actually just say, I don't want any compensation even, or like if you have any, they ask us just to donate it away to some charity organization of our choosing. But yeah, we do have like some budget for a mentor honorarium should any mentors ask for it. But from our experience, actually, it's not something that's really demanded or asked for.
And how has I know it's still young, but how has the program evolved since its beginning?
Yeah. Okay, this takes us to the very beginning. Should I still come with the portfolio later? Maybe I should stop sharing out now and just talk about this for now. So we experimented with quite a few different models from beginning, right? Our very first batch was actually purely the Y Combinator style. Like we offered a fixed amount of funding at like some sort of like equity valuation, and then we brought them through the program, and we found that was quite hard to pin down the early kind of like negotiations for investment, given especially in the blockchain space. I think valuations are like super crazy, and some people want to like, I want to issue tokens, or like, so equity doesn't make sense, and we have to talk about the SAFT model, how we can make that work. So nowadays, what we've landed on is that we may not have the upfront funding from us, but we do like review on a case-by-case basis. If there is a good opportunity and a good case, we do invest opportunistically. At the same time, where it makes sense to get the funding is often from our technology partners. So the guys from like Zilliqa, the guys from Polkadot, and from say Algorand, where like they want people to build on them. So they usually offer some upfront grant funding, or like maybe milestone-based, or they have an ecosystem investor, like in Algorand's case, Borderless Capital, who offer like this kind of like small upfront funding, and then like a certain commitment for to put in some investment as well in the entire cohort towards the middle of the program, or like towards the end of the program.
And so if somebody like Algorand invests, they're obviously doing that so that the companies will leverage their blockchain. And so obviously that's a difficult decision for a young company to make, given that Algorand obviously doesn't have the reach of Ethereum. How do you help them kind of understand the trade-offs?
Yeah, exactly. I think that is the kind of unique position that we have, right? I think like, coming from just the protocol perspective, like of course they just want to like, they want to grow the ecosystem. They want everybody to come and build on them, and so like they'll be the #1 blockchain, right? So we have the opportunity to be more objective in reaching out to these startups and be like, hey, your features sounds like, let's say you want to build on Polkadot. Like, okay, like, do you need to build a blockchain of your own? Do you need that kind of like flexibility and like running the nodes? Like, do you want your own people securing the network? Are you constrained by the designs of Ethereum, and therefore you need to build your own chain? Then like, okay, then maybe it makes sense to do Polkadot because they have substrate where you can like design your own blockchain very easily in a customizable way. And for things like Algorand, there are features on layer 1, for example, they have the Algorand standard assets, where you could do things like whitelisting addresses, forced transfers, and these are quite important for projects. They need to be very compliant and not just like fully saying that, okay, it's like immutable no matter what, right? And things like, well, if you're looking for, of course, the more scalable and like easily formally verified, I think like Algorand has some of those benefits, but I think many of the competitors have that kind of benefits. But in these, like, we look for these unique features like the Algorand standard assets, and we look for the startups that can fit these unique features, and like those would be the ideal candidates for both the startups and the ecosystem anyway.
Makes a lot of sense. Can you talk about the process for getting into the program?
Sure thing. So we well, all year round, we always love making connections with strong startups, strong founders. So if you're building something and you think it's super amazing, you've made some progress, happy to get in touch any point of time.
And you talked about, from geographically, you talked about you're in Singapore. You said you have offices in Shanghai and Hong Kong as well. So you're really focused on those areas, or is it more Pan-Asian, or is it more global?
Yeah, so actually we have help startups from all over the world, of course, based in Singapore, but also people from like Canada, US, Netherlands, Egypt, Japan, like across all continents, even Africa. So while our network is very much in Asia, our expertise in blockchain, of course, makes us like well positioned globally. But if you're looking for like the go-to-market support specifically, then of course like we'll be able to help the Asian projects or like projects looking to expand into Asia much better. Yeah, so I would say Asia focus, but open to global projects for sure.
One of the interesting things from my experience, so I've been crypto 24/7 for a little more than 3 years, and I was in Asia, had the pleasure of going to Asia 4 times last year. And I really came away from those visits with the belief that Asia was really the center of the universe for crypto, and that there was more activity, more investment, more government help in Asia than anywhere else in the world. And so what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people just kind of, a lot of projects kind of conceptually understand that like, oh, Asia is really interesting, right? There's a huge population, like everybody's like leapfrogging in terms of technology, mobile first, fintech is huge there, and so on. But then, there are a few kind of trends that we follow that we think, make Asia really a strong base, especially for crypto projects. I mean, and it's kind of like idiosyncrasies that people have to understand. I think one is that, Asians, rather like retail people in Asia love speculating on crypto assets. And you can see that in the boom of exchanges in like Singapore, Korea, China, and like people are going crazy in the ICOs and so on. While that's kind of not very good, in actually adopting. But if you can align the incentives in like, for example, nowadays with DeFi, they can be a very powerful force because they respond really well to like pure incentives and like would jump onto these kind of opportunities. And I think another thing is the like you mentioned with the government kind of support and like the strategic support, like it's really it's kind of quite unique to Asia where like, in Singapore, for example, you have Project Ubin that's already gone through 5 phases and
That's the
they've
central
actually
bank
gone.
digital currency project.
Yeah, exactly. Like the government, the central bank themselves are like directly working with industry players to then pilot and like deploy these blockchain solutions and demonstrate the benefits. And then the Sovereign Wealth Fund Temasek themselves now have joined the Libra consortium, and they're also venture building 3 blockchain startups internally themselves. So the governments, I think everybody heard of the China's DCEP, and like now Thailand itself is already in phase 3 of their CBDC experiments. So the governments themselves are like very involved in wanting to bring the technology in. And the enterprises and the many infrastructure players like the exchanges, conglomerates like Line, Kakao, or even in China, like our partners, Wanxiang Group, everybody wants to get these like strategic relationships in. So they want to work with startups. They want to like partner them, acquire them, invest in them, so that they can bring this innovation. And this is something that is different from the Silicon Valley style, like, oh, look for the brightest ideas and brightest people, but more like they really want to use it. They really want to invest in it, and therefore like want to attract people to work with.
It's interesting. You used a word that I use often as well, and that's speculation. Which I think if there's investing, there's gambling, and speculation's like in the middle. I think, and what I've really come away from is just that there's, I think, a higher, and it's not an appetite for risk, I would say, because people don't have an appetite, but I guess less of an aversion to risk in the Asian culture than in the rest of the world. That and obviously, we see Macau and how massive that is relative to, relative to Las Vegas, and think, oh, they like gambling. And that's what I thought when I first came. But then, when I saw, that these are, people aren't, there is certainly a lot of gambling going on by some segment of the retail. But I certainly think institutionally for folks like you, and I think, as you said, enterprises and even governments, that there's just, less of an aversion to risk. And so that there's more investment and more involvement going on in the sector again in Asia than the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes from just the kind of the general culture where well, people still regard like Asia or Southeast Asia as like rapidly developing nations, right? And like in this kind of like culture where things are moving fast, like the private sector is booming. There's always a kind of sense like I want to catch on to the next big thing, the next thing that's growing really quickly, right? So I think people in general are more open to these ideas because they do see like these startups, these companies like growing really fast and being successful.
And from a regulatory standpoint, how do you view the United States?
View the United States.
Yes.
Well, I can't say I'm a legal expert, so this is not legal advice. But certainly from the startups that we have worked with, and some of them are incorporated in the US, and many of them actually choose to then incorporate a second entity in Singapore, or to basically like just move the company to Singapore, because it's so much friendlier compared to the US, where like everything could be regarded as a security. If you haven't like built something yet and you try to sell it, it's a security. And like there's huge capital gains taxes where like if you have any crypto assets and if they somehow appreciate and value, then you have to like pay taxes on, and every time they fluctuate as well. So it's just a lot more cumbersome regulatory wise for startups in general. And I think that there are workarounds for it that people have done, like Delaware C Corp and like Silicon Valley people have figured out ways around it. But for crypto, where you're innovating, especially on like financial assets where things have value and like it's a kind of sensitive, touchy issue, it's just so hard in the US.
So are you seeing companies from the United States who are interested in working in Asia because it's easier to grow in Asia than, and to operate in Asia than it is in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think especially Singapore as a jurisdiction. Although I would caveat that, well, nowadays, Singapore has also issued a Payment Service Act for any exchanges or any like fiat crypto kind of like interactions. And while it's meant to be very friendly and they do kind of like rate you according to the level of like assets, the amount of risk that you are taking on, and they did like have a grandfather clause, right? If you're already operating, you can operate for a while longer without the license. But the new applicants for the licenses, like nobody has gotten it yet. So there is some level of like pullback from like the complete freedom of like everybody who wants to do ICOs just like come and do it in Singapore.
Well, that makes sense, right? I mean, it's a question of balance. And you don't want the Wild West has some downsides to it, but overregulation obviously has downsides as well. So it would be great if you wanted to talk about a few of the companies that have gone through the program, so you can get more of a sense of the types of companies you work with.
Yeah, for sure. So let me see. I can bring up the portfolio map for us. So in general, we like to work with projects just across the full stack, right? Anything from the protocols. Well, we invested in Polkadot, but we didn't accelerate the Polkadot team. But some earlier stage ones like Plasm, which is building a kind of like a scalability parachain on Polkadot, or like Lithion, which was co-innovating with SAP for a privacy preserving blockchain. So like they worked with us at a very early stage. So all the way down from protocols to things in the middleware, authentication, tokenization. Some of you may have heard of Alpha Wallet, quite widely adopted in the Ethereum ecosystem, and working with a couple of enterprises. I think the largest bartering platform in Australia is actually using their technology, analytics, decentralized computing, up to all the way to applications that may use blockchain. So things in the energy space, in the legal, music industry, energy industry. And I think recently in our batch 4, the most recent batch, we have companies which are part of Project Ubin, actually working with financial institutions. We have Statwick, which actually helps UNICEF track vaccines on the blockchain, and a few others. So we want to invest across the full stack, but also projects that can help bring users and assets onto blockchain, into Web 3.0. So we'll call this kind of like transitional projects where they may include fiat crypto gateways, compliance like blockchain analytics, or even like education, like simulating what is it like to own crypto or like buy and sell crypto. So more on the education space. So I hope this gives a rough impression. This is
No,
yet to be updated.
it looks very broad. which is interesting. And so getting back again, so how can companies apply for the program?
Yes. So to apply directly for the program, we typically set up a portal specifically for each cohort. So for Algorand, it's already been closed, but we set up like a longhashventures.com/Algorand application and apply there. So for our next cohort, we will also be setting up a dedicated page for you to sign out with. There's a simple form for you to just say, you know, what you're building, what problem you're solving, what's your progress, and so on. And then we'll review your application from there. The best way to know of this before you, as soon as it comes out, is to just follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, subscribe to our newsletter, and you will be notified as soon as the opportunity opens up.
And you mentioned that that you're going to be having a new blockchain partner that you'll be announcing shortly. And so is that like Algorand is your partner for this cohort? That's going to be your partner for the next cohort?
So we're going to have another partner for the next cohort. Super exciting. They're also one of the pillars of like blockchain infrastructure. And we'll be announcing that on 1st October. So I don't want to be like spoiling the surprise just yet, but definitely, you know, they're one of the very like early members in the whole blockchain space and building, I think, what we consider a very critical like element in the whole blockchain space.
And so obviously kind of DeFi is the hot area in crypto of the moment. Do you have any thoughts to share there? Are you looking at projects in DeFi?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one area that I haven't managed to talk about so far is that, you know, the accelerator is the operational bit. And at the same time, we do have our own investment fund as well, which we put into some of the startups we accelerate, and also could be into startups outside of the acceleration program. So things like early on the ICO age, I think we think, you know, a lot of the ICOs didn't make sense, but like Polkadot was one we're really bullish on, so we kind of like went very deep into that one. Nowadays, we are putting more capital into the DeFi space. I think especially looking at projects that are actually innovating and providing new innovations that were previously not possible. I think in terms of the timing, DeFi has really got it right nowadays. And with the token designs, now a lot of it makes a lot more sense compared to the ICO age, where like, you know, it's actually tied to the protection of network, maybe securing it as collateral, it tied to governance, you know, they're rewarded with the fees. So right now we are putting a lot more time and attention and capital into DeFi, yes.
And an area that I personally spend a lot of time in is stablecoins. Do you have any views on stablecoins, and you looking at anything in that space? And I think of stablecoins, you know, broadly as a subset of DeFi, although obviously there's some stablecoins that are not decentralized.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely an area worth paying a lot of attention to. I mean, stablecoins are, well, you could say one of the core elements or the core primitives, basic primitives to enable a whole DeFi ecosystem, right? Because if everything is just not pegged to anything in the real world, it's kind of very hard to value things and like hedge against things. So definitely a stable coin we consider to be a critical part. And I think that's why, well, Ethereum already has a strong stablecoin ecosystem. I mean, starting with USDT or like DAI, absolutely. And then of course, later on USDC, TrueUSD, and so on. Right now, what we're looking at are projects who are recreating like these primitives in some of the core ecosystems. So for example, on Polkadot, like Akala network, for example, is going to be creating this kind of like stable coin and also releasing liquidity from the staking. So very excited about that. On Algorand, there are quite a few projects who are looking to like leverage the stablecoin partnerships. They already have USDC, for example, integrated on Algorand, and many others are trying to innovate on that, maybe with like local stablecoins, regional stablecoins within Southeast Asia, for example, like all these different currencies. And so, absolutely agree with you that it's such an important part to bring people on as a core component for people to innovate upon stablecoins in DeFi.
And you mentioned, you know, both China's DCEP and Singapore's project Ubin. What do you think about central bank digital currencies, you know, both in Asia and around the rest of the world?
Yeah, central bank digital currencies is quite a touchy topic. I think they're kind of like multiple sides to the story, because while we're really excited to see the use case of blockchain like being legitimized in such a great way, right, where governments are actually using it for their currency, and like no doubt once the economy is on chain, a lot of the innovations that we're doing now can then plug into, if it allows for open integration, plug into like the blockchain architecture. And so you can recreate a lot of these things that we're doing in DeFi, potentially with CBDC. And so all the benefits will be brought there. Of course, I think with the movement of decentralization, everybody's also concerned with like things like privacy, things like control, and whether CBDC could be taking those away as well, given there's this complete transparency into the token holdings. How can we make sure that transactions below a certain amount and all that are still preserved in privacy? So excited, monitoring very closely, but with caution as to the implications of like what we stand for in like decentralization and privacy.
Is there anything in particular, because probably most people who aren't knee deep in the stablecoin CBDC world aren't really familiar with Project Ubin, but that's in terms of central bank digital currencies, that's one of the projects that's actually made more progress, I think, than than most others. Do you have any, given that you're in Singapore, any special insight to share?
Well, the central bank has been quite tight-lipped about any CBDC development. I mean, unlike China and Thailand, who are openly saying, "Hey, we're developing CBDC and we're gonna launch it soon." Like China says, by Winter Olympics, everyone's gonna use it. Live trials in so many cities and so many companies. Even Thailand, like they say, okay, all these companies are using it. In Singapore, there is less talk about CBDC, but if you read actually the circulars about Project Ubin, if you read the regulations about Payment Service Act and so on, they actually start mentioning provisions for like central bank digital currencies. And I think that sounds like, they're actually preparing to issue it. But then I think, they're very much more careful in how they communicate it, instead of like making like a hyped up kind of thing. They want to make sure that, they tested out the technology, they tested out with real players, which they have done with Project Ubin. And when they're ready to then adopt CBDC, they would. And I'm pretty confident that this direction that they will move in, because Singapore has always been a financial hub. And if indeed the future of finance, to make it truly borderless and open, you need some sort of CBDC, then like clearly they want to be a leaders in this. So I would add one more thing. While the government itself has not made open plans, they've allowed projects such as like there's a company called XFirst in Singapore, XFERS. So they've actually issued a Singapore-based stablecoin. And what's interesting is that XFirst itself is actually licensed or approved as a store of value facility, which is similar to like how you would pay for, like say the MRT, the trains, and you're allowed to like issue those cards, which like stand for like actual stores of value. So they actually have are allowed to do that. They have their own fiat crypto exchange, and they are issuing their own Singapore stablecoin. So they're certainly not averse to people already experimenting and launching products like this. And I can see the hints of like movement towards CBDC.
Wow, that's very interesting. So this has been great, super insightful, and this is obviously we're focusing on crypto Asia. So let's finish with a few thoughts on macro thoughts there. What's if you're talking to people outside of Asia, kind of what do you think the biggest misconception of crypto Asia is?
Misconception.
Or where do you think that they should know that they don't?
Yeah, I would say, echoing some of the points that we've made before, approach like Asia is not like just a one culture, one kind of giant group of population and people and ideas, right? When you think about Asia, you have to think about the countries that constitute Asia, right? So like China, Korea, Japan, well, of course, Hong Kong, Singapore, Southeast Asia, all of them have their different flavors. And often there's a need to like localize if you want to enter to these markets with the languages, actually go to the communities and like the people who run those communities to enter these markets, go to the local enterprises like in Japan or in Korea, it could be like Kakao. In Singapore, it could be some of the national enterprises. So you need to localize to enter these markets and need to be able to speak their language and understand their incentives, because I mean, once you do, there is like a very strong interest and impetus for people to get into these kind of projects.
Makes sense. And for Longhash Ventures, what's the message that you would like to leave people with about, both the accelerator and the venture arm?
All right. Well, to everyone, it's always a pleasure to speak to startups and people. We're always looking to expand the community, expand the ecosystem. So whether you're a first time, like just hearing about blockchain, hearing about crypto, and you want to build something, or you've been in the space for a long time and you're curious about how we could help you in Asia or globally, like always feel free to connect. We always want to bring value to everybody in our ecosystem and like foster a real sense of like open and integrated synergistic building on Web 3.0.
Well, terrific. And what's the best way to get in contact?
Well, with us, the best way is to just get in touch with us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, follow our newsletter. So just look for Longhash Ventures on any of these 3 platforms. Or you can email us directly at admin.sg@longhash.com, or you can tweet at me directly under Shi Khai on Twitter.
Okay, Shi Khai, this has been great. This is really learned a lot. I think it's still broadly underappreciated. Everything that's going on in Crypto Asia, obviously not in Crypto Asia, it's underappreciated. I think the rest around the rest of the world, but I think over time, people are waking up to it. So it's super exciting to hear what you're up to, and thanks a lot for participating on the show.
All right, thanks so much again, Lou. And well, thanks for also joining Longhash as a mentor. I'm looking forward to your contribution to the upcoming Algorand cohort. And to everyone else, look forward to the announcement on 1st October. So follow us to see the next cohort coming in. Hope to see you in the applications, funding and connections available, of course.
Okay, terrific. See you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we.